welcome, and thank you very much for making the effort to be here today, and particularly on such a cold start to the day. Must have been a lot of frost up in the hills, Scott. Fair enough. Victorian legislation changed recently, and lawyers are now all starting to pump out the information about Victorian enterprises having to have a proactive approach to ensuring that they provide a safe and healthy work environment. It's no longer acceptable to deal with stuff in hindsight. And our response to that as a group is, number one, to run this seminar with Diana from Apex, who many of you know, to give us an insight into what is required in a workplace. We've also got our lawyers at Tucker Partners developing a specific handbook around these topics, and that will be available to everyone in the entire group. And so I'm very pleased that you're here today. And here, this session will go till around 10. And if you need to use the restrooms, if you haven't been here, there's men's out here, there's ladies out in the hallway. And I'll turn it over to Diana.
Perfect. Well, thank you. This is probably one of our most run sessions in the last 2 years, particularly since the changes in the Fair Work Act. So they came into place 6th of March, where there was a lot more powers provided to the Fair Work Commission when it comes to dealing with complaints around harassment. So I'll talk a little bit more about them in the coming slides, but this is really about, these sessions are really about focusing on what the culture of Fletcher's is. So it's really trying to work out what are the expected, or it's not so much working out, it's just confirming what the expected behaviour is of all of our employees, and what type of obligations do we have as employees, as employers, as managers, when it comes to making sure that we engage in behaviour in our workplaces that's appropriate. So if we come into our workplace, there in the office, come to any open for inspections, come to any events, we expect our colleagues and ourselves to behave in a certain way. It has to be in a way that is reasonable. The conduct is not inappropriate in any way, where I feel mutual respect, I can come to work with dignity, I can feel safe in my environment. So these are the values that are coming through, and if we look at with what your policies are, that are coming through each one of those documents, and everyone should feel comfortable and safe to be in our workplace. And these are the values that we impart as well when we're actually dealing with our clients and our customer base. So the behaviour in the workplace clearly aligns with our cultural values, clearly aligns with our workplace values, as well as our code of conduct. And if we look at that definition there, we need to make sure in any of our dealings, whether it's with our colleagues, whether it's with our clients, customers, that our conduct is not unwarranted and reasonably interpreted to be demeaning or offensive. So this is what we define as inappropriate behaviour. So if we stay in our safe lane, if we align our behaviour with what our culture, our workplace expectations require of us, we know we clearly align with appropriate behaviour. Now, the thing is, when I come into the office, whether it's come into a client's office, whether I come into my own office, I need to make sure that I am operating in a way where I'm not causing any type of harm to any of my colleagues, any of my customers, any of my clients, any of my management leadership team, and that I'm not at risk of directly or indirectly causing any of these types of harms, psychological harms. So this is something that's come up quite a bit since COVID. If we're starting to look at the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which has had some significant amendments since COVID, where it starts looking a lot more at the psychological harms, the stress related to certain tasks, stress related to a particular environment, stress related to certain interactions. So if in any way my behaviour may be potentially causing some psychological harm to myself or to others, well, I would be questioning, am I doing the right thing? Is there any harm as a result to the physical health? Am I endangering someone by placing, I'm not saying it's anything, but I'm just using this one as an example, a cord, by placing certain equipment in a way which may cause some type of physical injury. Workplace relations is a significant harm in a workplace based on how we interact with each other. Think about the environment that we work in real estate. We're largely team-based. If we cannot effectively interact and engage with each other, that's going to have a significant impact not only on my team, but also on my department as well as my organisation. So we want to make sure our behaviour in any way does not cause any harm to these workplace relations. The way I personally engage with individuals, if I do not feel comfortable to say, good morning, Jeremy, because of potentially some fear of retaliation or a comment that he might make about something I've done, I've said, the way I've reacted to something, that has an impact on the way we engage as a team. If I don't feel comfortable speaking to certain team members, that will impact on the efficiency and the productivity of a team. So we want to make sure that whenever we behave, that it doesn't potentially cause any harm to our workplace relations and engagement. Job satisfaction, productivity and output. So they are direct correlations to the worker engagement. If I am unhappy with my environment, you can anticipate I'll call that sickie in as much as possible. I won't be as engaged in my job. I won't be putting in that 110%, take that great job satisfaction and want to give it my all. It's going to impact on my outputs. When it impacts on my outputs, it impacts on the organisational outputs. So we want to make sure that we create an environment where everyone is working to their peak, but everyone's enjoying it and feeling safe. That is the only way where we get that peak performance. How do I do it? I need to make sure that my behaviour fits in this category of appropriate behaviour, because that's when I start to get that cohesiveness. Now, when we talk about this inappropriate behaviour, it's funny because, whenever we do these talks, it's like, oh, I'm a manager, I'm never involved in inappropriate behaviour, or I'm an employee. It's always the leadership team that are acting inappropriately because they're only focusing on the dollars. Or I am always right, the customer or the client is always wrong. Now, inappropriate behaviour applies to anyone and can be carried out by co-workers, by clients, by supervisors, basically anyone. It is not defined and categorised to a particular group. Those of you working in property management, I want you to think about the type of inappropriate behaviour you may have physically witnessed, or being victim to, based on some of the interactions that you may have had with clients, particularly during the peak of COVID. And it's thinking about how could we have potentially addressed that in our workplace, raised it as an issue, and work ways to overcome it. Because in those cases, this inappropriate behaviour wasn't actually as a result of direct interactions in the workplace. It was unfortunately coming from a third party, but we needed to make sure that we always protect our employees and address any potential issues when it comes to workplace behaviour there. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail as to what we would consider as inappropriate behaviour. And there's 3 key categories. The first one is discrimination. Now, those of you that are in property management will be very familiar with this. Why? Because at the start of every rental application, we've got this document called a Statement of Information. And in it, it talks about all the ways an office cannot discriminate against an applicant when it comes to applying for a rental. It talks about all the protected attributes that we can't discriminate against. Guess what? That applies to all of us in the workplace. So if we look at discrimination and trying to work out, am I potentially discriminating against someone? Well, unlawful discrimination can come in 2 forms: direct discrimination and indirect discrimination. 2 different categories. Now, most of the time when we talk about discrimination, most of you will be quite familiar with the direct form of discrimination. That is where I personally discriminate against someone based on my actions, based on a protected attribute. I discriminate based on gender. I discriminate based on age, religion. Indirect discrimination, however, is where, as an office, as a group, we indirectly discriminate against someone through our processes, our policies. And we had one of these cases come through to us recently where an office had decided, and this was a smaller office, had decided our weekly office meetings are going to change from a Tuesday at 10 a.m. to a Tuesday at 3 to 4 p.m. The majority of the administrative staff in that office were part-timers and had commitments where they had to go out pick up children. So they finished work at 3 o'clock. That decision to change a meeting indirectly had discriminated against a large cohort of the workforce. That is what we call indirect discrimination. Having certain policies that indirectly discriminate against someone from not being able to apply for a promotion based on their personal attributes would potentially be another form of indirect as well as direct discrimination. So me not hiring you, and also I'd say I'm going to pick on Jeremy.
I'm used to it. I get harassed all the time.
Because he's a male, he does not have the attention to detail, to proofread a lot of my documents. Is me discriminating? It's got nothing to do about his capabilities, which is what I should be going out and considering when I'm looking at hiring or promoting someone. I'm just basing it largely on his gender. Direct discrimination. Me making a change or implementing a policy that indirectly is discriminating against a cohort is indirect discrimination. So we need to be wary of those. So what are some of the protected attributes that we find under the Discrimination Act? We can't discriminate against age, disability, race, including colour, national or ethnic origin, and immigrant status. gender, pregnancy, marital status, relationship status, family responsibilities, sexual orientation, gender identity, intersex status. Basically, any of those protected attributes. My big cheat sheet for a lot of, because I know if I say to someone, I'll pull out the legislation, you'll have all of those attributes there. My big cheat sheet for everyone is, if you're wanting to know what are the majority of those protected attributes, pull out that statement of information for rental applicants, and they've got a really nice succinct list in there. But we cannot discriminate against any of those protected attributes. All right, so that's the first one. We can't discriminate. So if we do, consider it as inappropriate behaviour, and it's against the law. The next one is harassment. So harassment is actually quite broad. So there's a number of ways I could potentially harass. And so what we need to do is be able to recognise the different types of harassment. Now, what is harassment? Look, it's the unwelcome conduct that humiliates, offends, or intimidates people. It is unlawful, and unlike bullying, which I'll talk later, a single event may lead to either enforcement action or disciplinary proceedings. So it's not a repeated behaviour, it's just one event can lead to enforcement action. So what are the different types of workplace harassment? First one is sexual harassment. This is the big one. This is the one, not only have we been seeing it all over the media, particularly around what has happened in federal parliament, but also the fact that it has led to significant campaigns. We've seen the Respect campaign, the Respect laws that have come through, and the changes to the Fair Work Act that came through on the 6th of March. Now, sexual harassment is the inappropriate sexual touching, gestures, sharing, sending explicit or sexually suggestive emails, photographs, texts, blackmailing to coerce into a sexual act. This is something that I need to be mindful of. Having come from worked in government for many years, and then coming into a lot of the real estate offices, I do need to emphasise, because when I look around and I see, oh, there's a lot of husband and wives working together, a lot of partners working together in government. I think probably about 80% of the workforce had some type of relationship there. The key term to sexual harassment is unwelcome. Where there's that mutual consent, where everyone agrees and it's welcomed, that is not considered a sexual harassment. So one thing I'd want you guys to be mindful of is, if I'm a couple and I'm in a mutual consenting relationship, it is not considered sexual harassment. But what I would want you to be mindful of is there any, general processes around the office as to how would we deal with that? What type of disclosures do we need to make disclosures to the leadership team around those mutual relationships? But this is unwelcome behaviour. What does that look like specifically? Now, a lot of these are complaints that we've received and we've had to take action on behalf of clients on. These are the type of things that we are constantly seeing come through. Sexual harassment, unwelcome physical touching, the constant hand on the shoulder, when it's making someone feel uncomfortable, the hand on the thigh. This was actually a case that had only just come through the federal court 2 weeks ago. The brushing past someone constantly and touching of the bottom when there was plenty of other space to move around. So unwelcome physical touching. is considered as sexual harassment. Inappropriate staring or leering, gazing at someone's body parts for longer periods of time, considered as sexual harassment. Remarks with sexual connotations. Now, sometimes we sort of forget where we're at. We forget we're at a workplace, and sometimes banter may go a little bit further than we expected. And sometimes we might make a joke because we're feeling quite comfortable and we forget that the person I'm talking to is actually a work colleague, not a friend outside of work, and we might make a comment that may be inappropriate. That could be deemed as sexual harassment. So be mindful of those. Suggestive comments or jokes. Circulating sexually explicit material. One we see quite a bit, unfortunately. We do see quite a bit. One thing I do need to remind everyone, apart from it not being acceptable, if it's not work-related, it shouldn't be on your computers. But I do need to remind everyone that everything on those work emails is owned by the organisation, and they have every right to review individuals' emails. So, based on that, if it is not work-related, and particularly if it falls into that category, do not have it on your computers, do not distribute it, do not display it. It does not belong in the work environment. Unwanted requests to go on a date. Another one we've had recently. It's okay to ask someone, it's very nice meeting you. What are you doing on Friday? But if you come back and say, sorry, Diane, I'm not interested. And then I come back again tomorrow, are you free? And he's like, I'm not interested. But I'm persistent. I'll come back again the day after until I get a yes. That can be, and it is, sexual harassment, particularly if they've made it clear. Thank you, but I'm not interested. I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. We've spoken about the sexually explicit and indecent emails, phone calls, text messages. That's a big one as well. A lot of our work nowadays is done through our technology, through our text messages, through WhatsApp, our social media platforms, distributing any type of inappropriate images, messages on any of those platforms can be deemed as sexual harassment. Displaying posters or magazines, I'm hoping we're way beyond that. We probably still see it, and I actually did see it when I dropped off a car to the mechanic the other day. I was like, whoa, I think I went back into the 80s. Yeah, very inappropriate. We did have one complaint where one employee had decided to put a picture of her on her holiday out at Bali. They're not one asking you about Fiji, but Bali, in her bikini. And other people were starting to feel uncomfortable about it. So it's just being mindful and being tasteful with the type of screensavers we may put. But yeah, that could be deemed as some type of harassment. Actual or attempted rape or sexual assault, that probably doesn't need any commentary around that. So any type of unwelcome behaviour is, in that sense, will be deemed as sexual harassment. So the two most common ones, based on what we're seeing coming through the courts and based on the information we're getting in terms of our complaints, are the sexually suggestive comments or jokes, so that banter that's gone a little bit too far, as well as intrusive questions about the private life. So what did you do on Friday? You met a girl? Did you take her out? Did you get to second base? Did you get to third base? Very inappropriate. All of those do not belong in the workplace at all. We need to be mindful of that. And I know sometimes when we're working very closely as a group, that they're not my work colleague, they're my friend. But there are others in that workplace as well. There are others that are seeing this, that are hearing this, that are potentially going to feel uncomfortable with that. So that type of questioning, that type of conduct does not belong in the workplace whatsoever. So, as I said, it's really important to understand that in these cases, that a single event may be enough for that to be unlawful and may lead to enforcement proceedings or disciplinary action by the leadership team. So it's not something, oh, it was just a one-off, I didn't mean that. It could potentially escalate quite quickly. As I've mentioned, 6th of March was a big date. It was a significant update to the Fair Work Act where the respect laws came straight in. What that meant is that an individual now under the Fair Work Act, or the company, so be it the perpetrator or the employer, may actually be liable for sexual harassment. Historically, any potential allegations were all covered by the local laws, being the Occupational Health and Safety Act. As of 6th of March, it fell under the jurisdiction as well, under the Fair Work Act. So now we have two regulators looking at this, WorkSafe and Fair Work. What that means is that there's more significant penalties and ramifications associated with any potential offences. It also means that under the Act, sexual harassment is not captured solely under a serious misconduct offence. It is an offence on itself and is also grounds for disciplinary action on its own merits. By including it into the Fair Work Act, it also provided the regulators a lot more powers to deal with some of these allegations. Historically, what we ended up seeing is when it was a complaint made to WorkSafe, they only got involved after the incident or after that individual has left. Fair Work now have the powers to get involved a lot sooner. They can go out and make orders a lot sooner. They can go out and insert themselves when it comes to conciliation and mediation. So they've got a lot more powers to deal with these types of allegations a lot quicker and hopefully a lot more efficiently. So, first type, sexual harassment. The next one is personal harassment. Now I'm hoping this will work, but I have a video, and this is the best way to summarise. One second.
It says a new U.S. Census just came out and said for the first time, minority babies are now the new majority. Hey, you know what that means, right? I am no longer the bad guy white American. I'm now just another weak minority like the rest of you.
Well, first of all, you are pretty weak. I mean, lippy flappy, you know what I'm saying? Hey, and as far as minority babies go, it's Robert and all his people here making all the babies.
I'm machismo! I'll make babies. But Michael here, he'll have a couple of kids. A couple of babies that'll know the violin by the age of 3. Have a couple concerts, and they get scholarships and lock all our kids out of the university. That's right. Asians are the new majority.
Hey, we're minority too. We just push our kids a little more, that's all.
Tiger Moms are like some kung fu matches, right? Well, you go practice fine.
So can I say, going into so many offices that we do, and walking, and we love walking into lunchrooms, we love walking into little pods and listening to the banter. And it is not uncommon for our team to hear something like this. And what it is, it's that little banter between colleagues, and it's, you know, the little nudging and it's the little pushing. But it gets too far. That we really need to be mindful that some of those comments are offensive, derogatory. They're there really to humiliate, criticise, really to bring someone down. That is unacceptable, particularly if I am not a party to that conversation, yet I am there. I have to listen to this. And if I'm one of those cultural groups, I take offence to it. So we really need to be mindful as to what is harmless banter and what has crossed that line, and really be in a position to pull that back or take it outside of the workplace, particularly if I'm having this banter with a very close friend. Again, in the workplace, we're all colleagues, and in the workplace, there are others that are utilising this space as well. That type of behaviour does not remain in that workplace. Physical harassment. Under no circumstances, it's like I'm constantly saying this to people. I feel like I talk to my kids. Hands and feet to yourself. We do not have included physical threats, verbal threats that may lead to a full-blown assault whatsoever. We can't be engaging in that. I'd said it, I think I'd mentioned it. We were astounded. We had a complaint come in, I think it was almost 3 weeks ago now. 2 directors had assaulted each other in a business. You know, it wasn't employees.
We kept that quiet.
I know. Sorry, was this not the place to say it?
Exactly.
But this is it. It was a physical assault. Not acceptable. If you can't deal with it rationally, calmly with words, take a 5-minute break, walk away, calm down, and then try and redo it, or engage another party to assist you with trying to communicate the issues through. Physical threats are not acceptable. I'm going to play the video and then talk about this one. And this one, to give some context. Sometimes, I understand we work in a very stressful environment. Sometimes we have pressures. Sometimes we feel like everything is just coming in too quickly, and I feel like I need to meet particular deadlines and I need my team to support me. But we need to make sure that when we're communicating to our colleagues, our team members, we do it appropriately and not, I'll get it right.
You are my problem. You can't do anything right. You're such an idiot.
Yeah, I'm going to fess up. I get one of those days and I feel like, oh my God, why couldn't they just listen to the instructions? Why couldn't they follow it? But under no circumstances can I speak in that manner to a colleague, to a team member, to an employee. I need to think about how else can I provide my comments, my feedback to a colleague, to an employee, in a way where I do not verbally harass them. It's my responsibility as an employee who's coming into this workplace, who has to make sure that everything I do aligns with appropriate behaviour and work in an environment that provides mutual respect to communicate in a way that is effective. And I am not constantly directing uncomfortable or criticising comments towards someone. So verbal harassment is definitely not on. And what we do need to think about is there are those significant ramifications if we continually verbally harass someone. Remember about some of those harms? The first harm we spoke about was the psychological harm. It's that stressful environment. If I'm constantly speaking to someone in that way, can you imagine how that is impacting on that particular individual? So we do not communicate in that way. Last one is inappropriate questions. You know, a lot of the time people think that, oh, it's harmless. It's, you know, I didn't mean anything by it, you know. I'm not harassing if I'm asking someone if they're a natural redhead or not. Oh my gosh, very inappropriate. You know, I keep saying, and you know, I get scared sometimes when I ask this question to a group. If it's not a question you'd ask your mum, your dad, your sister, your brother, your child, you don't ask it in the workplace. And, you know, I'm taken back when some people say, oh, that's something I'd say. You know, it's those inappropriate questions. We all know, you know, if your gut instinct's telling you it's not right, if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you know it's not going to get that intended reaction or it's going to make that other person feel uncomfortable, you don't ask it at all. So, no inappropriate questions. All right, so harassment. As I said, very different. You can see we've gone through all the different types of harassment. The thing with this one is that one instance can be unlawful and can lead to disciplinary or enforcement action. We need to make sure we're aware of it. I did put that comment because it is one that we've heard. It's one that came through. And it was, again, a very largely male-orientated office, and I was just stunned. And they thought it was a joke, but it's not. So, harassment. This was a real-life federal court case where there was a complaint made about a particular individual where they were making a joke around sexual harassment to a colleague. It was reported, gone up to the CEO, who then had to start a formal investigation regarding these comments that the employee had made. When they were doing the investigation, they had realised that it wasn't only that comment that this employee had engaged in. There were other subsequent complaints around an apron that they wore at a work barbecue that had a woman's body parts on it. There was a fake incident report or a fake complaint made around it was people being uncomfortable or having hurt feelings as a result of an action that was taken. So it was an incident, a mocking incident report around, oh, this person's had hurt feelings, which has resulted in me feeling this way. So they were mocking a particular individual. So they had identified that in terms of harassing behaviour, this individual, even they might seem like little small harmless jokes, was actually in this case not a one-off. It was a cultural trait from them where they were constantly engaging in a type of behaviour that was deliberately there to make someone feel uncomfortable. The CEO in this case had no other choice but to dismiss based on how this individual's performance wasn't aligning with those cultural values. The employee had decided to put appeal in to Fair Work. That was actually dismissed. Why? Because they found that the employer in this case, based on those little but repeated events, had absolutely no faith or confidence in that employee's abilities to maintain the group's values and ensure that he complied with the code of conduct. So, remember those three little incidents? One is comments, the apron, the hurt feeling reports. You know, if we look at them individually, we'll probably think, it's neither here or there. But each of them are deemed as harassing behaviour, and each of those are enough to lead to grounds for dismissal, which we've seen tested in the courts was upheld. So, big one that we need to be mindful of. Workplace bullying. We're in the home straight now. Workplace bullying, last type of behaviour that we need to be aware of. A little bit different to harassment because bullying is actually the repeated behaviour. It's unreasonable behaviour directed towards worker groups or a group of workers, and it creates a harm or a risk to health and safety. For those of you, I hate to bore you, but historically there was no offence under the Crimes Act or under the Occupational Health and Safety Act when it came to bullying. Back in the days, the only way to take action against a bully is to try and capture the behaviour under the Stalking Act or the stalking provisions under the Crimes Act. Because if we look at what stalking is, it has exactly the same attributes. Thankfully, Occupational Health and Safety Act was updated and we've included bullying as part of it. But it is a very, very serious offence, one that does lead to some significant penalties and potentially to imprisonment. So what are the forms of workplace bullying? Unjustified criticism or comments constantly directed to an employee for no reason apart from, I don't like it, or I'm just constantly giving them a hard time. A change to work arrangements such as rosters and leave to deliberately inconvenience a particular worker. Unfortunately, we see this particularly with some employee or employers where, as a way of trying to performance manage someone out, so, perhaps we'll give them a hard time. Some people do it unintentionally and go out and change someone's rosters, not being aware. That would have been perceived as bullying. However, if I deliberately know this is going to impact on someone's ability to appropriately perform their role because they've got prior commitments, that would be considered as bullying. Spreading misinformation or malicious rumours, talk about those water cooler chats or the kitchen room or the bathroom chats. And you know they're happening because as soon as you walk in, you hear the door, you walk in and then there's silence. And it's, are they talking about me? They probably are, but it's me. But that type of behaviour, we're not in a schoolyard, doesn't belong there, and guess what, it doesn't belong in the workplace. Denying access to information, supervision, consultation or resources. As an employee, I have a right to have access to all the information I need in order to effectively do my role. That means I have access to policies, procedures, information. If you are expecting me to do a job, to prepare a CMA report, to prepare a rental agreement, I'm relying on you to provide me the information. If you're going to withhold that information, and my role is specifically to do the administrative tasks, you're not allowing me to do that. If you're constantly doing that and that's impacting on my performance, that is considered as bullying. So we need to make sure that we're constantly providing that information, we're sharing it, we're not holding it to ourselves. Setting tasks that are reasonably below or beyond a skill. Gone are the days, sink or swim. Oh, I always hear it. I came into real estate, I didn't have any training, they just put me in the role and said, do it. Hang on. We employ someone based on their skills and capabilities, and we expect them to be able to do a role based on their skills or capabilities, not to do a role that's 3-4 times above them without the appropriate training or support. No. We also don't expect someone who's employed in a senior role, oh, I've decided today, you're the coffee boy, Reno. Coffee boy, that's all you're doing. That's it. No, that's way beyond, way below someone's skill set. The role needs to be aligned with their role. Expectations are. Setting unreasonable timelines or constantly changing deadlines. Look, we're in a role where sometimes, deadlines do change quite suddenly. I thought I had a week to prepare the property. Damn, I've only got 2 days. That is reasonable. But if I am just changing it for someone because I've decided, that would be deemed as unreasonable. If I am giving them 1 week and on every task I push it forward to a day without any justification, that could be conceived as withholding information. We spoke about that. Deliberately excluding someone from workplace activities. This is a group effort. We're all required to attend all these events. We're all required to share all this information. But I'm going to start a WhatsApp group and I'm going to invite 9 of my team members to that WhatsApp group, and that 10th person, well, I don't really like, so I'm not going to include them. I'm not going to pass on information about outcomes of our OFIs, how we went, what our results were, to one person in my little WhatsApp group, because you know what, they should have been there. No, that information should be disseminated to everyone. Yes?
Social activities outside of the workplace.
Yeah.
So 4 people go out and they don't invite 1 person, they do it regularly. But it's not a workplace activity. Is that what?
So the big thing is, if it's not a work function, no. I have to be nice. I have to work cohesively with everyone in the workplace. I need to be very nice, interact appropriately, but I don't need to be best friends outside of the workplace. I don't need to go for the after-work drinks. However, if the after-work drinks is a extended work function, a team event, for me to exclude that person, I've invited everyone else except for that team member, and it's constant, that could be perceived as bullying. So it's really looking at, is it extended, is it a workplace activity, or is it just a social event? Does that make sense? All right. Abusive, insulting or offensive language or comments. So they are all different attributes of workplace bullying. So this is a real estate case when it came to workplace bullying. Small real estate office where it was the principal and the principal's wife was working more in an administrative function in the agency. And, you know, she was always at the front reception and she was generally the person that would see all the walk-ins coming through. She really didn't like a particular sales consultant, wasn't a fan of hers. That whenever there was walk-ins, she was quite happy to disseminate them to everyone except for that one employee. And so that one employee thought, why am I not getting the fair share of these walk-ins? Why are they not coming to me? So she made a complaint. Wow, boss's wife didn't like that, did she? Didn't take too nicely to that. So she thought, I'm gonna make her life a little bit harder. You know, I'll share the listings, but gee, who is she? And she became a little bit more hostile. So the sales agent, she ended up having a listing and asked the boss's wife, who also did administrative work, look, I've got an appraisal, I need you to prep this up, put the pack all together, and please email it out to the vendor by this time frame, because that was the boss's wife's responsibility. She didn't like being told what to do by this sales agent, but she did prepare the whole pack for her. But instead of emailing it that day, she decided to put it into regular post and sent it out. In that case, that sales agent made a complaint to Fair Work around bullying. And it was found that not all of the actions that the boss's wife had engaged in were considered as inappropriate, but ones that were directly impacting on her ability to do her role, such as not sending out that appraisal and deliberately taking actions that were going to impact on her successfully doing her role, were bullying. Behind all of this, which led to the complaint, is that that employee was suffering from significant depression just coming into that workplace, having to deal with that boss's wife. The outcome of this one was a significant compensation pay that was paid out to that employee based on the way a particular staff member was engaging with her repeatedly. So, bullying. We need to be mindful that constant repeated behaviour, if it's there intentionally to make someone feel uncomfortable, if it's offensive, it would be considered as bullying. So, the thing with the bullying is, yes, we're talking about repeated behaviour, but can I say that in a lot of workplaces, just because things don't go your way, doesn't automatically mean that it's bullying. Again, we get a lot of calls, I'm being bullied. Okay, all right, talk me through what's happening. Oh, my manager, he's just constantly talking about, you know, how I'm not performing, that I didn't do this. Oh, okay. Some cases are not bullying. If I am expressing a difference of opinion, so think about, look around, you're all very different. You've all got different views, coming from different backgrounds. We're not all going to agree on something, and when I'm in a team meeting and I disagree with Jeremy, if I disagree with Bradley, but they agree, doesn't mean that I'm being bullied against. As long as I've had the opportunity to be heard, and even though the decision might go the other way, I'm not being bullied. Difference of opinion is not being bullied. Providing constructive feedback or direction. Hey, you know, you did all right, but you still made a couple of mistakes in this form. Do you mind redoing the copyright? Do you mind redoing the layout of the photographs? It's just not right. And if that's constant, doesn't mean that it's bullying. It's just providing that constructive feedback to be able to do the work correctly. Reasonable employer supervisory action, particularly when it comes to performance management. Performance management is not bullying. That is me trying to address why someone's not performing as per their job descriptions, their KPIs or their performance standards. That is reasonable. Disciplinary action for misconduct. If you've done something wrong, I will take action as per our disciplinary process. Asking an employee to perform reasonable duties in keeping with their job. What we all need to be mindful of is that our job description somewhere, and I can almost guarantee it in everyone's, will have a particular line saying other duties as required from time to time. So if you get asked to do something that you don't normally do, doesn't mean, oh my God, I'm being bullied at, that I've done something wrong today. That's it, they're taking action against me. No. We all have to sometimes do some of those administrative tasks we don't like. That is not bullying. Victimisation. So what we need to make sure is that if we see any of those cases, so whether it's bullying, sexual harassment or discrimination, and if I potentially feel uncomfortable and I want to make a complaint or raise it with my leadership team, under no circumstances should I feel like I am being victimised for raising this. That in itself also is against the law. So everyone should feel comfortable enough to raise their concerns with their leadership team. We cannot be seen to victimise. So how do we, as a group, as an office, make sure that we continue doing the right thing? Because I love the fact I haven't had to deal with any of these things within the group, so that's good. So how do we continue? Well, the first way we do it is we need to make sure we have a process. And guess what? As Bradley had mentioned, you've already got a process. You've already got policies which TAC partners are now just reviewing for you, because that's the first step. You've got to have a process. And what we need to do is we have to have clear policies which set out the expectations as to what we need to follow, what we need to do. And it has to be precise. The thing with these workplace policies, they actually reinforce what our expectations are, what are our standards, what are our values, what's our code of conduct. The thing is, as a workplace policy, in order for me to make sure I do the right thing, you need to know what they are. So every so often, you need to review it, come to some form of training, but you need to know what you're expected to do. So you've got to familiarise yourself with those policies. Every so often, as Bradley mentioned, your policies are going to get updated. Why are they being updated now? We only need to look at our landscape. Bullying, harassment and discrimination have significantly changed over the last 2 years. So we've got to make sure we're constantly across the updated legislation and our policies are updated to reflect that. The next thing is we've got to make a commitment. We are not going to tolerate that type of behaviour in our workplace. Our workplace values will not allow it. Our code of conduct will not allow it. And that commitment should be ingrained in every single one of us, in everything that we do, and in the way we interact with each other. We've got to establish a clear and confidential process. What that means is that if I am a victim to it, if I've seen something, I should be able to know what the process is to report it and who to report it to. But more importantly, that process remains confidential. I don't want to report something in news around the grapevine that everyone else knows about it. It has to remain confidential. I need to make sure that the behaviour is reported. We can't maintain this great culture if we don't know what is happening if we don't know if there's a problem. So the behaviour always needs to be reported. And we should provide a number of ways, which it will be. Once you get your policies back, I am sure there will be something in your grievance procedures which will say, how do I raise a concern? Who do I raise it to? Next one is never turn a blind eye. That's the worst thing that we do. And you know what? It wasn't directed to me. Not my problem. I just witnessed it. No. If you see it, you need to be in a position to take action. If you're a victim, you need to report it. So that's a big thing. We're not going to stamp out this type of behaviour or make sure it doesn't happen in our office if we just ignore it. Don't brush it under the carpet. Articulate the consequences as part of your policies and procedures. You're going to see there will be a disciplinary policy which will tell you clearly what action will be taken if you do the wrong thing. We need to be aware of what it is. We also need to be aware of what support or counselling will be made available to us. If I am one of those people that does need to make a complaint, so I'm sure you'll see something in there. There'll be something from a referral over to corporate support. I think someone had mentioned the use of the domain services, the employee assistance program, or knowing that you can call 1800 Respect, WorkSafe, or even a referral over to a medical practitioner just to discuss any particular concerns. Now, the last thing I wanted to end on. See all those policies we spoke about? Discrimination. This leads on to the question that you had earlier. Discrimination, harassment, and bullying. Hey, think about our workplace environment. Think about COVID. Where was our workplace? Oh, it was probably in your lounge rooms at that time. Think about where the bulk of your work is being done. Open homes. You may be invited to corporate events. All of those policies that we spoke about don't just apply to your time in the office. They apply to all locations where you are engaged to work, where you are engaged to represent your organisation. And so at times when you're outside of the office attending a workplace function, all of these policies will still apply to you. So we don't forget about our bullying. We don't forget about our discrimination. We don't forget harassment, sexual harassment, victimisation, or any vilification or violence. As well as, I'm going to throw in another policy, we don't forget that when we're outside of the workplace, there's a couple of other policies that may apply to you guys, is your drug and alcohol policy and your use of company cars, because that's where we also see a lot of incidents when it comes to social events. All of those policies, when you are there representing your group, your employer, all of those workplace policies still apply at those events. It's really important that we're mindful. Just because I've left the doors of my office, that, hey, I'm free. I don't need to worry about any of that. Those policies will still remain each time you're representing your brand, your group, your employer. So be mindful of that. All right, serious breach of any workplace policy can be grounds for disciplinary action, which, worst case scenario, will lead to termination. It can lead to other things such as counselling, mediation, training, but in some of these offences, it will lead to disciplinary action. So we need to know what our requirements are. So familiarise yourself with the policies and procedures as soon as they're ready and get circulated. All right, that's it. 10 minutes over. I'm more than happy to wait if anyone's got any questions, but otherwise, thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time.